at stake, and holding corporations accountable is at stake. And again, there's so much more. So, Mr. Chairman, I do believe this hearing is a clear attempt to jam through a Supreme Court nominee who will take health care away from millions of people during a deadly pandemic that has already killed more than 214,000 Americans. I believe we must listen to our constituents and protect their access to health care and wait.
Day tomorrow, probably after sunset, and you can see how these will continue for the...
Senator Kennedy.
All right, we are watching the confirmation hearing of Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett, and that was a pretty stunning moment there where you have a vice presidential nominee who is a sitting senator and a participant in this Judiciary Committee hearing 3 weeks before the election, with comments saying that the woman you see there on your screen who is the nominee, Amy Coney Barrett, is someone who's going to undo Ruth Bader Ginsburg's legacy. And I want to bring in folks to talk about this, including Gloria Borger.
It's pretty light.
And your jaw warm.
As it should be. I can't think of another position, at least not a position that is for life, not a position in which the occupant is not elected by the people, that is more powerful, at least not in the Western world, than an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. And this process is not supposed to be the big rock candy mountain. Our job is to advise and consent. And that's one way of saying that we're supposed to make sure that the president hasn't, whatever president makes the nomination, hasn't made a mistake. And we all, as you can see, take that job seriously, as you can see, and we know you respect that. That's why I think over the next several days it's appropriate for us to talk about your intellect, which is obvious, by the way, and your temperament, your character, and your judicial philosophy. And I hope we can talk about something else. And that's the role of the federal judiciary in American life. Now, look, Judge, I'm not naive. I understand this thing can turn sour real fast. We all watched the hearings for Justice Kavanaugh. It was a freak show. It looked like the cantina bar scene out of Star Wars. And I know, for someone unaccustomed to it, that it hurts to be called a racist. I think it's one of the worst things you can call an American. I know that it hurts to be called a white colonialist. And I know it must hurt for someone of deep Christian faith like yourself to be called a religious bigot. And to have it implied, because you are a devout Christian, that you're somehow unfit for public service. Before it's over with, they may call you Rosemary's Baby, for all I know. I hope not. And I know, as we've seen this morning, I know you think it's unfair. It is unfair for my colleagues to suggest, some overtly, some more indirectly, that if you're put on the United States Supreme Court, you will be on a mission from God to deny health care coverage for pre-existing conditions for every American. I know that seems preposterous to you, and it seems that way because it is. Take comfort in the fact that the American people, some of my colleagues disagree with this statement. They believe in government. I believe in people. The American people are not morons. They can see drivel when they see it, and they can appreciate it when they see it for being what it is. Now, and they can appreciate it when they see it for being what it is. Now, let me turn to what I hope quickly we can talk about today. Americans love democracy. We'll even fight for it, and we have. And that's a wonderful thing. It's an important thing in today's world as this world becomes more authoritarian. And our founders, but we don't have a pure democracy. As a columnist I read this morning said, when we have to decide a complex issue dealing with social norms or economic issues, we don't all put on a toga and go down to the forum and vote. We have elected representatives. Those are members of Congress. And it is our elected representatives' job to decide social and economic policy. And if we don't like what they do, they're accountable. We vote them out. But in the last 50 years, certainly in the last 25, the United States Congress, either voluntarily or involuntarily, has ceded a lot of its power to the executive branch and to the federal judiciary. When I say the executive branch, I'm not necessarily talking about the president. I'm talking about the administrative state. The bureaucracy, as some call it. It's this giant rogue beast that enjoys power now that only kings once enjoyed. Members of the administrative state write their own laws. They interpret their own laws. They litigate their own laws in their own courts before judges that they appoint. And Congress has allowed that to happen. I think Congress has also abdicated a lot of power to the federal judiciary. I do. And I'm not saying that federal judges don't make law. Of course they make law. They make law in the context of a specific case. It's called judicial precedent. But our founders intended federal judges to exercise judicial restraint and to understand the special role, scope, and mission of the federal judiciary vis-a-vis the United States Congress. I don't think our founders intended judges to be politicians in robes. I think our founders intended judges, federal judges, to tell us what the law is, not what the law ought to be. I think our founders intended, as the Chief Justice put it, I think our founders intended federal judges to call balls and strikes. I don't think our founders intended for federal judges to be able to redraw the strike zone. I don't think our founders intended for judges to be politicians in robes. Politicians, you don't want the United States Supreme Court to turn into this. Trust me. Politicians get to vote their preferences under our democracy. Judges do not. Judges do not. And finally, unlike some of my colleagues, I don't think our founders intended the United States Supreme Court to become a mini Congress. I don't think our founders intended members of the United States Supreme Court to try to rewrite our statutes or the United States Constitution every other Thursday because to prosecute a social or an economic agenda that they can't get by the voters. And that goes on in America every day. We've reached the point where one single solitary federal judge in a limited venue can enjoin a federal statute or an executive order of the President of the United States for the entire country. And our founders never intended that. I want to close with two very short quotations. The first, stated much more eloquently than I can, is Justice Curtis in 1857. You probably read it. He was dissenting in the Dred Scott case. This is what Judge Curtis said. When a strict interpretation of the Constitution, according to the fixed rules which govern the interpretation of laws, is abandoned, and the theoretical opinions of individuals are allowed to control its meaning, we have no longer a Constitution. We're under the government of individual men, who for the time being have power to declare what their Constitution is according to their own views of what it ought to mean. And finally, a more contemporary statement from a gentleman that you're very familiar with, Justice Scalia. He said it in real world terms. This is what he said. The American people love democracy, and the American people are not fools. The American people know their value judgments are quite as good as those taught in any law school. Maybe better. Value judgments, after all, should be voted on, not dictated. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Kennedy. Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge Barrett, congratulations to you and to your family. I'm delighted to see that they are back in the room, and I'm thrilled that they are here with us today. You know, we have had 164 American citizens come before this committee for nomination to the Supreme Court.
Robert Bork in 1987, and they have all learned that it is a far safer course not to engage with the questioners about their judicial philosophy, especially about
the afternoon.
Late renewal. Judge Amy Coney Barrett. If you listen closely to their full statements, it betrays their true intent. If you go back through the transcript, you're going to find not a coherent legal counter-argument, but a panicked stump speech on behalf of their controversial platform. Rather than reviewing your judicial philosophies, they're instead choosing to project their own desires and their fears onto the American people. It sounds as if they are trying to create a panic. They decided to drum up indignation over the fact that you dared to present a counter-argument against the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act. Apparently, a difference of opinion between two brilliant jurists who often disagree is just too much for them. The rhetoric is unsettling, but after listening to them, I worry more about its underpinnings, because my colleagues' remarks have displayed their troubling belief that nothing but an activist judiciary will do for them. Given your track record, you'd think that my colleagues would jump at the opportunity to support a successful female legal superstar who is highly regarded by both her Democratic and Republican colleagues, and who is a working mom. But as today's increasingly paternalistic and frankly disrespectful arguments have shown, if they had their way, only certain kinds of women would be allowed into this hearing room. On that note, not so long ago in another hearing, they scrutinized your commitment to your Catholic faith and tried to use that as a way to question your competency and your professionalism. They know that that is unconstitutional. The Constitution forbids it. You are a brilliant jurist and a constitutional law expert. You will be an intellectual powerhouse on the Supreme Court, and you will steer the panel's focus toward textualism and originalism as rightful guiding philosophies. I love Justice Scalia's definition of textualism. Textualism in its present form begins and ends with what the text says and fairly implies. He goes on to defend textualism and explains that this method can lead to both conservative and liberal outcomes. Similarly, originalism doesn't always lead a jurist down the path they'd most like to follow. This method of interpretation holds that the meaning of a legal document, such as the Constitution, remains fixed, even when applied over time to new questions. Staying true to these guidelines requires more study and patience than other methods that allow judges to reinvent the law or be activists when things get tricky. Since taking the bench, I appreciate that you have written over 100 opinions and have participated in over 900 appeals where you have applied this complex reasoning. Thank you for that. We know that you are a prolific scholar and author of over a dozen articles on the courts and the Constitution. The ABA has rated you as well qualified to serve as a Supreme Court Justice. I appreciate that many times you've probably done this with the child in your arms, on your hip, or somewhere in tow, maybe waiting for a ball game to begin. You have done all of this as you have been
cauliflower, carrots, and radishes.
Impressive qualifications by any standard. So it is no surprise that you are fielding attacks from other angles. Many of my colleagues have wasted a lot of their time complaining that the process, in an effort to delay and obstruct a legitimate, constitutionally sound confirmation hearing. Let's not forget, it was the Democrats who took an axe to process in 2018 when they dropped last-minute, unsubstantiated sexual assault allegations against Justice Kavanaugh. We still don't have the full story about their level and manner of coordination with activists and mainstream media outlets, but what we do know is that they turned that confirmation into a circus. And on that note, it is hard to take seriously their complaints about moving too quickly. We've heard about the timeline for Justice O'Connor, 33 days, Justice Ginsburg, 43 days. And just a word on Justice Ginsburg, whose seat we are filling. She was indeed a role model for many because she fought to open more doors for women in the law and beyond, and I sincerely hope that I am as effective an advocate in the Senate as she was on the court. We know from studying American history that women have had to always fight for a seat at the table. This goes back to Abigail Adams, who urged her husband John to please remember the ladies in their fight for independence. And we know it took 150 years for women to get that right to vote, but the Constitution allowed for that amendment process. Unfortunately, what we see today is that radical activists would like nothing more than to take a hatchet to process. Their favorite play is confronting the American people with the supposed illegitimacy of the Constitution. They argue that our founders' flaws, and yes, they were flawed. All humans are. That the flaws invalidate the principles that bind this country together. This betrays a dangerously naive understanding of the point and purpose of our founding legal document. The timeless principles contained in that document were written to protect individual rights, absolutely. These principles, of course, include the separation of powers and federalism in our government. These principles, of course, include the separation of powers and federalism in our government, a system of checks and balances that prevents encroachment by one branch or another. If Congress acts beyond the scope of its legislative authority or the president grows too power hungry, the judiciary has the authority to rein that branch back in. And if the vast bureaucracy dares to overregulate, states and their citizens have the right to stand up and challenge that overreach as being beyond the scope of federal power. Together, the separation of powers and federalism have protected our republic from falling into the hands of tyrants. But keep in mind that the founders despised the tyranny of British rule just as much as they despised the whims of the mob. Flash forward to today, when American exceptionalism is under bitter attack from yet another mob. While most Americans take pride in our heritage, a vocal minority finds fault at every turn. They demand to know, can we still call the Constitution a relevant, valid source of law, even if no women or people of color participated in the drafting? Are the principles in that document still capable of curbing abuses of power and safeguarding freedom? Can we have faith that the future of democracy remains strong despite a summer of looting and violence in the streets? The answer to each is yes. And over the next few days, I expect that you, Judge Barrett, will explain why. So many families are watching today, and we're all going to be listening. Thank you for appearing before.
I'll tell them how Liberty Mutual customizes car insurance, so they only pay for
That. And we do have the ABA rating regarding Judge Barrett. I'll introduce it in the record, but it's fairly short, so I'll just read it if that's okay. The American Bar Association Standing Committee on the Federal Judiciary has completed its evaluation of the professional qualifications of Judge Amy Coney Barrett, who has been nominated by the President to be an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States. As you know, the Standing Committee confines its evaluation to the qualities of integrity, professional competence, and judicial temperament. A substantial majority of the Standing Committee determined that Judge Barrett is well qualified, and a minority is of the opinion that she is qualified to serve on the Supreme Court of the United States. The majority rating represents the Standing Committee's official rating. Enter that into the record. Now we have a...
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
could you explain what CDC compliant means?
Means that the room is set up, social distancing regarding the virus, that the architect of the Capitol measured the space. And as to me, I was tested a week ago Friday, at brief contact with Senator Lee. I was negative. I've been told by Senator Moynihan and a physician in South Carolina, there's no requirement to test me. I feel fine. My exposure is not such that I should be quarantined or tested. Anybody that wants to get tested, they can. And I made a decision to try to make the room as safe as possible, but to come to work. Well, millions of Americans are going to work today. Somebody may have tested positive in a restaurant, a military unit, fire department, or police department. You make it as safe as possible, you manage the risk, and you go to work. I'm not going to be told to be tested by political opponents. I'm going to be tested as an individual when the CDC requires it. I think we can safely conduct this hearing. We have, and I think it's off to a good start. So I do care about everybody's safety. But as a lot of Americans out there, we have to go to work, and you can't demand not to show up to work unless everybody you may come in contact with is tested whether they need to or not. And we're not going to do that here. Now we have a panel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy, for that question. We have three people, our two colleagues from Indiana, Senator Todd Young and Senator Mike Braum. I know Louisiana adopts our judge here, but she is living now in Indiana. And the third is Professor Patricia O'Hara, who I'd like to briefly introduce. Professor O'Hara is Professor Emerita, I hope I got that right, of law at Notre Dame Law School. She has served on the faculty for 40 years. She first arrived in Notre Dame in 1971 As a first-year law student, she graduated summa cum laude and first in her class in 1974. Described as the heart and soul of Notre Dame for over 40 years by current Notre Dame Law Dean G. Marcus Cole, Professor O'Hara's career at Notre Dame was that of a trailblazer. She was the first woman to graduate first in her class from Notre Dame, the first woman appointed by the Board of Trustees to serve as an officer of the university as Vice President for Student Affairs, and the first woman to serve as Dean of the Law School. So with that, we'll start with Senator Todd. I think all these individuals are remote. Senator Todd? Todd Young?
Well, thank you, Chairman Graham, Ranking Member Feinstein, and members.
You're talking about one of the most popular couples.
Indianapolis, Indiana. I am honored to appear before you to introduce Judge Amy Coney Barrett, a remarkable Hoosier poised to make her mark on our country. She truly is an American original. In 2017, when there was an opening on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit, my office began looking for an extraordinary American who would uphold the rule of law. In response, we received dozens of applications from many of the finest legal minds in the state of Indiana. My staff and I began researching in earnest to learn everything we could about each candidate to determine who among them would make the best judge. And I interviewed the best of the best. One of those was a constitutional law professor from the University of Notre Dame by the name of Amy Coney Barrett. I first met with then Professor Barrett in the spring of 2017, and it was abundantly clear that she was a star. A brilliant legal scholar, she was and is held in the highest regard by her peers in the legal world. Her integrity and character are unimpeachable. She's a model of collegiality and fairness. And simply, she possessed all of the necessary qualities to be a great appellate court judge then and to be a great Supreme Court justice now. My colleague, former Senator Joe Donnelly, and I approved of her nomination, and a hearing was set. Unfortunately, some resorted to attacks on Judge Barrett's religious convictions. I can tell you that in Indiana and much of the country, faith is viewed as an asset in a public servant, not a liability. As Notre Dame President Father Jenkins reminded us then, being a person of faith doesn't interfere with one's ability to apply the law. Thankfully, Judge Barrett's qualifications outshone personal attacks, and she was confirmed by a bipartisan majority to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit. As a member of that court, Judge Barrett's proven that she is a rather brilliant jurist who interprets the Constitution as written and carefully weighs the facts of a given case. Interprets the Constitution as written and carefully weighs the facts of a given case. She's heard more than 600 cases on the Seventh Circuit and authored nearly 100 opinions. And I should note, she is the first woman from Indiana ever to serve on that esteemed court. During that Seventh Circuit interview back in 2017, it was obvious that Judge Barrett loved the law and the Constitution. Her love for her family, her husband Jesse, and their 7 children was also clear. If confirmed, Judge Barrett will be the 5th woman and the first mother of school-aged children to serve as a Supreme Court justice. Now, being a parent doesn't qualify one to sit on the Supreme Court, but it does give us Hoosiers yet another reason to be proud of Amy Coney Barrett and the trail she's blazed leading her to this moment. Education, faith, community, equal justice under the law. These are all values that Midwesterners hold dear. Indeed, they are values that Americans hold dear, and they are all values embodied by Judge Barrett. Author Kurt Vonnegut, another American original from Indiana, once said, "I don't know what it is about Hoosiers, but wherever you go, there's always a Hoosier doing something very important." Where Amy Coney Barrett has gone, she has always been doing something very important. From raising a family, to educating the next generation of scholars, to administering justice on the Court of Appeals. It's my hope that this body will confirm Judge Barrett in a bipartisan fashion so that we will soon find another Hoosier doing something very important on the Supreme Court of the United States.
Why did he warn us? He said nothing. He told Woodward that he didn't want to panic the American people. That's
The quicker picker-upper.
It honestly, it made my entire few months, you know, it was...
Yeah.
Hey, Chairman Graham, Ranking Member Feinstein, it's an honor for me to join Senator Young and Professor Emerita O'Hara to introduce a fellow Hoosier who makes our state proud. I'm doing this from my hometown, Jasper, Indiana, at City Hall, literally, and we're on Main Street. And figuratively, from a place, town, state, that represents a broad cross-section of our country. In 2013, Justice Antonin Scalia wrote that the federal judiciary is hardly a cross-section of America. Today, it's still easy to see what he meant. When confirmed, Amy Coney Barrett would become the only justice of the Supreme Court who spent the majority of her professional life in Middle America, not on the East Coast. When confirmed, she will be the only sitting justice who did not receive her law degree from Harvard or Yale. Yet her Notre Dame law credentials are also from a first-rate university. When confirmed, she will be only the second current justice to join the court from west of the nation's capital. When this vacancy arose, I was the first to voice my support for a nominee from the Midwest because I believe we need more judges who understand those Midwestern values that guide our lives: faith, family, community, and respect for the law. Amy Coney Barrett is that quintessential Midwesterner, hardworking, generous, humble. She's a top-flight law scholar. She's just as comfortable at the Saturday morning tailgate as she is in the ivory tower, a legal titan who drives a minivan. I immediately supported Judge Barrett's nomination, not only because she is a highly qualified jurist, but because she's proven both on and off the bench that she has the decency and fundamental respect for our country and its Constitution to serve honorably. And now, much will certainly be made in the coming days of Judge Barrett's Catholic faith and how she practices it. It's a faith that I and many Americans share. Our founders anticipated this question, and as they so often do, got it right. Liberals and conservatives alike are bound by the Constitution's firm edict that no religious test should ever be required as a qualification to any office of public trust under the United States. I believe hostility toward Judge Barrett's religious beliefs today could set a dangerous precedent of hostility toward other religious beliefs tomorrow. Judge Barrett has been clear in her public life where she falls on the question of faith and the law. As she concluded in a 1998 essay, we're sure to hear cherry-picked over the next few weeks, judges cannot, nor should they try to, align our legal system with the church's moral teaching whenever the two diverge. Faith is very important to most Americans, and I agree that faith should be a key word. Faith is very important to most Americans, and I agree that faith should be a key word in Judge Barrett's confirmation. But I believe the most important question of faith should be, is she willing to faithfully interpret the Constitution? Judge Barrett's record shows that she will. Throughout her nearly 100 written opinions on the appellate court, Judge Barrett has proven that she is a strong constitutional originalist who will not cut the American people out of their own government treating the Supreme Court as a third chamber of Congress. On the bench, her qualifications are beyond question. Off the bench, she exemplifies the generosity and character Hoosiers are known for. And she has lived a life rooted in those heartland values I mentioned before. Community and respect for the law. Hoosiers should be proud to have Amy Coney Barrett serving and representing our state currently. And I believe she will make all Americans proud as a justice of the Supreme Court. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Professor O'Hara. Professor? Is the professor with us?
So these are confirmation hearings during a pandemic and via Zoom, where a number of the senators have joined remotely, and we're waiting to hear from Patricia O'Hara, an esteemed professor at Notre Dame University, who Judge Amy Coney Barrett has credited with being a mentor and is highly revered at Notre Dame. What really these statements we just heard is sort of crafting the biography of Judge Barrett, to let everyone know this is a mom of 7 with a minivan who is eminently qualified for the Supreme Court.
Right, and who distinguished herself throughout her undergraduate and law school career to then become one of the top professors consistently voted at Notre Dame. We'll hear some more of that if we do get Professor O'Hara on Zoom. I mean, these are the problems with doing a hearing remotely at times. But this is all leading into her opening statement, which is when the nominee uses that moment to kind of introduce themselves to the American people. That's when we will hear from her about what's important to her, the kind of judge that she hopes to be, the kind of people who guided her life. Sometimes these statements can be deeply personal, if you think about how past justices have handled them. Hers, I think, based on the opening excerpts that we've seen, the printed remarks, if she doesn't deviate from that, hers seem a little more restrained. I mean, she talks about her family and her children, describes them a little bit, talks about being a mother and a fan of Notre Dame football, that she hopes she can tell some of the justices about that. And she'll have a fan, Justice Thomas, who's also a big football fan. But, you know, there's not any kind of the soaring language and vivid imagery that we heard from even some of the conservative male nominees, like John Roberts, who talked about the limitless possibilities he saw reflected in the fields of his Indiana childhood. Or Justice Alito, when he talked about his father getting a scholarship that helped him buy a used suit that he...
Management screwed it up. You didn't. You didn't make the mistake. And by the way, it all got paid back, but guess who made the greatest sacrifices? Auto workers. You made the sacrifices to get it back. So it's...
Stand up, please. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give this committee is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Welcome to the committee, to your family. You've done a great job over there. The floor is yours, Judge.
Ranking Member Feinstein, and members of the committee, I'm honored and humbled to appear before you today as a nominee for Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. I thank the President for entrusting me with this profound responsibility, as well as for the graciousness that he and the First Lady have shown my family throughout this process. I thank Senator Young for introducing me, as he did at my hearing, to serve on the 7th Circuit. And I also thank Senator Braun for his support. And while she could not be with us via the satellite, I am also grateful to former Dean Patty O'Hara of the Notre Dame Law School. She hired me as a professor nearly 20 years ago, and she has been a mentor, colleague, and friend ever since. I thank the members of this committee and your other colleagues in the Senate who've taken the time to meet with me since my nomination. As I said when I was nominated to serve as a justice, I'm used to being in a group of 9, my family. Nothing is more important to me, and I'm very proud to have them behind me. My husband, Jesse, and I have been married for 21 years. He has been a selfless and wonderful partner every step of the way. I once asked my sister, "Why do you think marriage is hard? People are always saying that." "I think it's easy." And she looked at me and said, "Well, maybe you should ask Jesse if he agrees with that." I decided not to take her advice because I know that I am far luckier in love than I deserve. Jesse and I are parents to 7 wonderful children. Our oldest daughter, Emma, is a sophomore in college who just might follow her parents into a career in the law. Next is Vivian, who came to us from Haiti. When Vivian arrived, she was so weak that we were told she might never talk or walk normally. But now she deadlifts as much as the male athletes in our gym, and I assure you she has no trouble talking. Tess is 16, and while she shares her parents' love for the liberal arts, she also has a math gene that seems to have skipped her parents' generation. John Peter joined us shortly after the devastating earthquake in Haiti, and Jesse, who brought him home, still describes the shock on JP's face when he got off the plane in wintertime Chicago. Once that shock wore off, JP assumed the happy-go-lucky attitude that is still his signature trait. Liam is smart, strong, and kind, and to our delight, he still loves watching movies with Mom and Dad. 10-year-old Juliet is already pursuing her goal of becoming an author by writing multiple essays and short stories, one of which she recently submitted for publication. And our youngest, Benjamin, is at home with friends. Benjamin has Down syndrome, and he is the unanimous favorite of the family. He was watching the hearing this morning, I'm told, and he was calling out our names as he saw the kids in the back. My own siblings are here, some in the hearing room and some nearby. Carrie, Megan, Eileen, Amanda, Vivian, and Michael are my oldest and dearest friends. We've seen each other through both the happy and hard parts of life, and I am so grateful that they are with me now. Each other through both the happy and hard parts of life, and I am so grateful that they are with me now. My parents, Mike and Linda Coney, are watching from their New Orleans home. My father was a lawyer and my mother was a teacher, which explains why I became a law professor. More important, my parents modeled for me and my 6 siblings a life of service, principle, faith, and love. I remember preparing for a grade school spelling bee against a boy in my class, and to boost my confidence, my dad saying, "Anything boys can do, girls can do better." And at least as I remember it, I spelled my way to victory. I received similar encouragement from the devoted teachers at St. Mary's Dominican, my all-girls high school in New Orleans. When I went to college, it never occurred to me that anyone would consider girls less capable than boys. My freshman year, I took a literature class filled with upperclassmen English majors. And when I did my first presentation, which was on Breakfast at Tiffany's, I feared I had failed. But my professor took the time to talk to me. She filled me with confidence about how well I had done, and she became a mentor. And when I graduated with a degree in English, she gave me as a gift. Although I considered graduate studies in English, I decided that my passion for words was better suited to deciphering statutes than novels. I was fortunate to have wonderful legal mentors. In particular, the judges for whom I clerked. The legendary Judge Lawrence Silberman of the DC Circuit gave me my first job in the law, and he continues to teach me today. He was by my side during my 7th Circuit hearing. He swore me in at my investiture, and he's cheering me on from his living room right now. I also clerked for Justice Scalia, and like many law students, I felt like I knew the justice before I ever met him, because I had read so many of his colorful, accessible opinions. More than the style of his writing, though, it was the content of Justice Scalia's reasoning that shaped me. His judicial philosophy was straightforward. A judge must apply the law as it is written, not as she wishes it were. Sometimes that approach meant reaching results that he did not like. But as he put it in one of his best-known opinions, that is what it means to say that we have a government of laws and not of men. Justice Scalia taught me more than just law. He was devoted to his family, resolute in his beliefs, and fearless of criticism. And as I embarked on my own legal career, I resolved to maintain that same perspective, losing sight of everything else. But that makes for a shallow and unfulfilling life. I worked hard as a lawyer and as a professor. I owed that to my clients, to my students, and to myself. But I never let the law define my identity or crowd out the rest of my life. A similar principle applies to the role of courts. Courts have a vital responsibility to the rule of law, which is critical to a free society. But courts are not designed to solve every problem or right every wrong in our public life. The policy decisions and value judgments of government must be made by the political branches, elected by and accountable to the people. The public should not expect courts to do so, and courts should not try. That is the approach that I have strived to follow as a judge on the Seventh Circuit. In every case, I have carefully considered the arguments presented by the parties, discussed the issues with my colleagues on the court, and done my utmost to reach the result required by the law, whatever my own preferences might be. I try to remain mindful that while my court decides thousands of cases a year, each case is the most important one to the litigants involved. After all, cases are not like statutes, which are often named for their authors. Cases are named for the parties who stand to gain or lose in the real world, often through their liberty or livelihood. When I write an opinion resolving a case, I read every word from the perspective of the losing party. I ask myself how I would view the decision if one of my children was the party that I was ruling against. Even though I would not like the result, would I understand that the decision was fairly reasoned and grounded in law? The party that I was ruling against. Even though I would not like the result, would I understand that the decision was fairly reasoned and grounded in law? That is the standard that I set for myself in every case, and it is the standard that I will follow so long as I am a judge on any court. When the president offered me this nomination, I was deeply honored. But it was not a position I had sought out, and I thought carefully before accepting. The confirmation process and the work of serving on the court, if confirmed, requires sacrifices, particularly from my family. I chose to accept the nomination because I believe deeply in the rule of law and the place of the Supreme Court in our nation. I believe Americans of all backgrounds deserve an independent Supreme Court that interprets our Constitution and laws as they are written. And I believe I can serve my country by playing that role. I come before this committee with humility about the responsibility that I have been asked to undertake, and with appreciation for those who have come before me. I was 9 years old when Sandra Day O'Connor became the first woman to sit in this seat. She was a model of grace and dignity throughout her distinguished tenure on the court. When I was 21 years old and just beginning my career, Ruth Bader Ginsburg sat in this seat. She told the committee, "What has become of me could only happen in America." I have been nominated to fill Justice Ginsburg's seat, but no one will ever take her place. I will be forever grateful for for the path she marked and the life she led. If confirmed, it would be the honor of a lifetime to serve alongside the Chief Justice and 7 Associate Justices. I admire them all and would consider each a valued colleague. And I might bring a few new perspectives to the bench. As the President noted when he announced my nomination, I would be the first mother of school-aged children to serve on the court. And I know that it would make Senators Young and Braun happy to know that I would be the first justice to join the court from the 7th Circuit in 45 years. I would be the only sitting justice who didn't attend school at Harvard or Yale, but I am confident that Notre Dame could hold its own, and maybe I could even teach them a thing or two about football. I would like to thank the many Americans from all walks of life who have reached out with messages of support over the course of my nomination. I believe in the power of prayer, and it has been uplifting to hear that so many people are praying for me. I look forward to answering the committee's questions over the coming days. And if I am fortunate enough to be confirmed, I pledge to faithfully and impartially discharge my duties to the American people as an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judge Barrett. Let's try Professor O'Hara. Any luck with her?
I'm here, Chairman Graham.
Thank you. I apologize for the problem. The floor is yours.
That's very kind of you. It's anticlimactic because you've already heard from the most important person from whom you need to hear. But it's very kind of you to take the time. I have known Judge Amy Coney Barrett for
As you can hear, the testimonials continue about Judge.
I first came to meet her when, as Dean of the Law School, together with my colleagues, we recruited her to the faculty in 2002. I was aware of her reputation as a law student, but I had not taught her. So I can well remember that in the initial interview, from my standpoint, I was not thinking of her so much as a Notre Dame alum, but rather as a candidate in whom many law schools would have an interest. After all, she was first in her class. She was executive editor of the Law Review. She had held 2 distinguished clerkships for demanding jurists, Judge Lauren Silverman on the Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, and Justice Antonin Scalia, a short period in private practice at Baker Botts, and an Olin Fellowship at George Washington University Law School. So from my standpoint as dean, in a market in which law schools compete aggressively for candidates with sterling credentials like hers, Amy Coney Barrett was a big hit and a big win for us. In the course of the next few years, I was responsible for creating an environment in which she could take her potential and reach the maturation that would be necessary to meet the demanding standards of excellence in scholarship and teaching for promotion to tenure. I want to assure you that it was the easiest task of my entire 10 years as dean. I watched her develop into an exceptional teacher and a superb scholar. Except that I must confess to say watching her develop is a bit of a misnomer because in many ways, Judge Barrett sprang full grown into the legal academy. The first of 3 distinguished teaching awards that she holds from our students was presented to her by only the 2nd class that she taught. And in my annual visits to observe her classroom teaching, it became clear to me why that was the case. Our students then and now hold her in awe for the power of her intellect and for her consummate professionalism. To read her student teaching evaluations is like reading a thesaurus that only has superlatives in it. Her classes are known for the clarity of the presentation of substantive legal material, but also for open-minded, non-directive discussion, question and answer, respectful of differences and of differences in learning style with our students. Our students strive to meet her high and demanding expectations because they just don't want to disappoint her. And they greatly appreciate her availability outside the classroom for mentoring and support. At the same time that she was developing and building relationships with our students, she also produced an incredible portfolio of scholarships, superb in both its depth and its quality. The scholars around the academy hold her work in the highest regard. And so when it did come time for her tenure case, I can only tell you, without breaching the confidentiality of that process, that it was as easy as a tenure case could possibly be. Her SIOUX, University of Chicago, Columbia, Cornell, Virginia, and Texas, to name but a few. I was not surprised in later years when she was tapped for service on the Appellate Advisory Committee on the Federal Appellate Rules of Procedure and elected to the prestigious American Law Institute. And in her 3 years as a judge on the Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit, her opinions have been characterized by the same qualities as her scholarship: intellectual rigor, painstaking analysis, clarity of legal reasoning and of writing, accompanied by her deep commitment as a jurist to apply the law to the facts of the case before her. Stellar as her professional accomplishments are, no introduction of Professor Barrett is complete without talking about her personal qualities. She is brilliant but humble, fair and impartial but empathetic, open-minded and respectful of differences, a skilled listener and able to build consensus, generous, especially to those in need. If I had to describe her in just a few words, I would tell you that Amy Coney Barrett is a woman who leads an integrated life of mind, heart, and soul. And it's that integration that allows her to move so seamlessly between her professional responsibilities and her family commitments. It humbles me now, as it did 12 years ago, that I was tasked at one point in my life with evaluating the professional qualifications of Judge Barrett in a university setting. Truth be told, she ran circles around me as a junior faculty member, and in the intervening years, she has left me completely in the dust. And nothing gives me more joy than to be able to say so, because this is the standard of excellence that we should demand for institutions of singular importance to us. I have only had 2 opportunities to communicate with this distinguished committee. The first was 10 years ago when I wrote a very strong letter of support for then nominee, now Justice Elena Kagan, whose tenure as Dean of Harvard Law School overlapped with my own tenure as Dean here. The second is today, in presenting Amy Coney Barrett to you and endorsing her in equally strong terms. There may be some who would find those 2 recommendations in juxtaposition, but I find them entirely consistent. Over the course of my 40 years in the legal academy, I've been blessed with the opportunity to meet many Supreme Court justices. As to the justices I've met, while their judicial philosophies may differ and their interpretive methodologies may differ, what they share is powerful intellects, rigorous work ethics, skilled listening skills, the ability to be open to persuasion and also to persuade themselves. To be fair and impartial, they are people of integrity, and they have a commitment to applying the law to the facts of the case before them. They understand that their role as justices is to advance the rule of law, not to advance personal policy preferences. They understand their solemn responsibility to preserve the court as an institution, not wings of the court, a single institution that plays a singular role in our republic. I know firsthand, from having worked closely with Judge Barrett for almost 20 years, that she possesses all these same qualifications in abundance. And I trust that over the course of the next few days, with the opportunity to engage in dialogue with her, that you will come to the same conclusion and recommend her for confirmation as an Associate Justice to the Supreme Court of the United States. Thank you so much for taking this late opportunity to have me say a few words about Professor Barrett. Thank you so much for taking this late opportunity to have me say a few words about Professor Barrett.
Thank you very much, Professor O'Hara. Thank you, Judge Barrett, and to your family, congratulations and welcome. We're going to have a couple long days ahead. Questions for the record will be due this Friday at 8 o'clock, which is standard practice for the committee. We begin tomorrow, 30-minute rounds, followed by 20-minute rounds. Just do the math. Got a couple long days ahead of us, so get some rest. We will be in recess until tomorrow at 9 o'clock.
And And with that, that ends the first day, a day of basically opening statements. I'm Chuck Todd of NBC News, and we're continuing MSNBC's special coverage of the confirmation hearings for President Trump's Supreme Court nominee, Justice Amy Coney Barrett. The opening day of these hearings is now wrapped up. We're going to keep an eye on what Senate leaders have to say as they leave the hearing room. Senate Democrats have said they will be holding a press conference shortly. And with just 22 days ago until the election, millions of people voting early, it has been a day of raw partisan emotions and frustrations. And it all came through in these opening statements from all the senators. Judge Barrett's opening statement seemed to acknowledge the divisiveness of these proceedings, as she vowed to apply the law apolitically, as written, if confirmed. As she faces scrutiny from Democrats about her conservative Christian philosophy, Judge Barrett also said she believes the value judgments of government should be made by the political branches and not the courts. We've got a lot to talk about, so let's dive in. And I want to begin, actually, with the value judgment issue when we get to it. But let me check in first with Garrett Haake on Capitol Hill. Eventually, Garrett, your last name will be Hill if you're on Capitol Hill long enough. So, Garrett, the mood of both sides behind the scenes, Democrats and Republicans, I sense a little bit of frustration on the right with the Democrats. I don't sense the same frustration on the left with the Republicans, though.
Well, things got chippy here after the break, Chuck. You saw several Democrats, perhaps most notably Senator Kamala Harris, criticizing the fact that we're even holding this hearing at all, given the state of the pandemic, the fact that several senators had tested positive for the virus in the last couple of weeks. And a number of Republicans took exception to that. You had the response from Lindsey Graham, of course, the chairman, Mike Crapo, who's generally one of the more understated guys really in the entire Senate, got a little bit upset about the characterization of that. But then beyond that, again, I think we're seeing very clear lines develop here. Democrats are going to turn this hearing into a proxy vote about health care, try to link the appointment of this justice to the repeal of Obamacare. And on the Republican side, again, especially after the break, you saw a return to what could either be described as a pre-buttal or a straw man argument of Republicans defending Judge Coney Barrett against attacks that weren't coming. The idea that she was being attacked because she is a woman or because of her faith, which is not actually anything we heard from Democrats. So I think that storyline could develop over the next couple of days and could be interesting to see if Republicans just sort of keep laying out this trap of saying, come on, go ahead and do this. We're expecting it, and Democrats aren't interested. They want to focus on health care and Roe and some of these other key issues.
Nothing is gonna stop me.
Or yum-yums. So
did Ryan.
By the CDC to hold the hearing safely, and Graham pointing out people all across America are going to work today, and his argument was that essentially, why shouldn't we?
Indeed. Well, Martha, I was just thinking back to the last time we sat together during the Kavanaugh hearings. It feels like this one is going to be different. Maybe a last thought on that from you.
It does. I think that there is a feeling, and of course we all know anything can change, but there's a feeling that Democrats have decided that this process is going to move forward, that it didn't reflect well on them last time around when they put Kavanaugh through the ringer with really absolutely no evidence, as it turned out in the end. So I think they're refraining and a bit more restrained in this process, but no doubt you're going to hear some zingers and some very, sort of ominous warnings about this judicial nominee from them over the course of the next couple of days, Dana.
I look forward to being here with you for that. Thank you, Martha.
Thanks, Dana.
Okay. Let's bring in the Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence. What a pleasure to have you here today. I know that you're out campaigning, and there is an election underway. I do want to quickly ask you about the Supreme Court nomination. Earlier today, Joe Biden talked about Amy Coney Barrett in regards to faith. Take a listen to what he had to say. All right, they're working on getting me that sound.
Question. Well, I tell you what, we're already in the midst of a real fight here. Everyone knows in 28 days, 20 million Americans may lose their health care. This nominee said she wants to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. The president wants to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. Let's keep our eye on the ball. This is about whether or not in less than 1 month, Americans are going to lose their health insurance.
Mr. Vice President, as Martha pointed out, the hearings focused a lot on coronavirus and healthcare, and I wonder if you think that it would have just been easier for the Trump administration to have withdrawn this lawsuit that has caused so many political headaches for the Republican Party.
Well, Dana, good to be with you from Columbus, Ohio. Tremendous enthusiasm out here across the Buckeye State for President Donald Trump's re-election. And I think it's because this president's kept the promises that he's made to the people of this state. And as the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, the president's elected for 4 years. So let's just begin there. That, you know, there have been 29 vacancies on the Supreme Court during election years since George Washington through Barack Obama, and in all 29 cases, the president made a nomination. The Senate is now participating in their constitutional role to advise and consent. The opening statements today are going to give way to hearings over the course of this coming week. But everyone is doing their constitutional duty. I think what is really striking is that it would be I'm curious whether Joe Biden in Ohio today is going to answer the question that he refused to answer in the presidential debate. Kamala Harris refused to answer in the vice presidential debate, and that is whether they're going to yield to the radical left and pack the court if they somehow win this election. I mean, it really is outrageous that on Friday, Joe Biden said that the American people don't deserve to know whether or not he's going to pack the court, a court that's been 9 justices for 150 years. But here the liberals go. They're going to say, if we can't win by the rules, we're going to change the rules. After the election, we're going to add seats to the court and obviate what Republicans are doing in their constitutional duty. I think the American...
Look, we used to say separate them. We don't say that anymore. What we say now is if you can keep distance from your newborn baby, do. But of course you should hold your baby, wear a mask while you hold your baby, and perhaps most importantly, do breastfeed your baby, because that breast milk can actually help protect them against various infections.
All right, Elizabeth, thank you so much for that information. And now to the ever-expanding disconnect between the president and the pandemic. President Trump says the virus is, quote, disappearing, but you just saw the numbers. It's very much still here, and it's actually getting worse. And President Trump back on the campaign trail today, just 11 days since he was diagnosed with coronavirus. His doctor says the president is, quote, no longer considered a transmission risk to others. Carefully chosen words there. The president himself says he is immune, which scientists are questioning because it has not been clinically proven that immunity occurs after an infection. And the White House is being pretty mum on critical details, like when the president last tested negative and if he's taken fever-reducing medication. Nevertheless, the president is insisting on keeping on with his COVID misinformation tour, taking it to Florida tonight, a state that added 5,000 new cases over the weekend. It is in a fully reopened phase. It could soon be a, quote, house on fire, as one infectious disease specialist put it, because of its new cases. I want to bring in Dr. Peter Hotez. He's a professor and he's the Dean of Tropical Medicine at Baylor College of Medicine with us now. Doctor, if you were in the White House, what would you say to the president in his campaign? Is it possible to no longer be infectious in 11 days?
Well, the big picture, Brianna, is I would say you're the president of the United States. You have an obligation to protect the public, and what we continue to see is the same playbook that we saw all summer, where they were downplaying the epidemic, downplaying the public health impact, downplaying the severity. You know, the president kind of neglects the inconvenient truth that the reason he's able to do what he's doing is because he's been privileged to get a unique treatment. I mean, look, we're in for a horrible winter. I mean, before I tell you something terrible, I want to just preface it by something good, which is that I think our lives will get better in the fall as vaccines become available. So by middle of next year, our lives will be better. So we have a lot to look forward to. But in the interim, we're in for a horrible winter. The cases are already starting to rise. The northern Midwest is already seeing a steep increase in the number of cases. This will be true across the northern states, maybe the entire country. We're already starting at a high level. We've started at 35,000 cases. Now we're up to 50,000. The deaths are projected to double. This is going to be a historically awful time for the country, both in terms of cases and deaths, and as was pointed out, our mental health. People are going to be scared. We've got to make hard decisions now about who we're going to socially distance with as we hunker down for this terrible, terrible winter. We have to get ready, and this is a time when we really need the comfort, the soothing, and the advice of the president and the executive branch of the government, and it's gone. It's evaporated, and what happens after the election could be even more vacancies in the White House. So this is a time when we really need a strong federal government, and I feel like we're being abandoned in many respects.
I want to...
Gender discrimination. Women cannot be charged more for health care just because they're women. Pregnancy cannot be treated as a pre-existing condition. And Justice Ginsburg dedicated her life to gender equity. Sometimes folks in covering the ACA mistakenly say it benefits 10 million or 20 million or 30 million Americans. It benefits a majority of all Americans. Those with pre-existing conditions and those whose pre-existing condition is being female. We should not turn away from a focus on protecting the health care of a majority of Americans in the middle of a pandemic. So much more than that is at stake in this confirmation, which we will lay out in the next 2 days, but this is the most pressing and most important thing in the middle of a pandemic. Let me now turn it over to my friend and colleague, Senator Blumenthal of Connecticut.
Thanks, Senator Coons. They say they have the votes. They say they have the votes. They may have the votes on this committee. They don't have the American people on their side, their votes. They don't have history on their side. Conor Kern is on the right side of history. Every time I look at this picture, it just breaks my heart to remember all of the pins and needles that have been stuck in this young man, all of the procedures, all the pain and anguish. At the very least, the anguish of paying for it should not be imposed on Conor and his family. This hearing is going to be about real people and the harm that Justice Amy Coney Barrett could do to those real people in real ways if she is confirmed and she overturns the Affordable Care Act. Twice she has said that she would vote to overturn the Affordable Care Act had she been a justice in the 2 previous decisions. She's written that Supreme Court precedent can be disregarded if it conflicts with how individual justices' positions are aligned. This danger is real and urgent. But there are 2 other health care issues on the line here. Reproductive rights is a health care issue. Women's control over their bodies and their decisions about health care is a right of women under Roe v. Wade, which is in danger because of specific letters and ads that Amy Coney Barrett has signed. And we're going to be asking about it. Gun violence is a...
Trump administration.
Well, we're watching cases rise in Central Europe. Look, Dana, this is a global pandemic. Our focus has been on the health of the American people, but we recognize that you're seeing cases rising in other places around the world. And And we're not going to have this behind us until we have a safe and effective vaccine. That's why it really is remarkable that under President Trump's leadership with Operation Warp Speed, we really are on track to have one and maybe more safe and effective coronavirus vaccines before the end of this year. And I want your viewers to understand, at the President's direction, we're also manufacturing those vaccines right now so that the second that the FDA says that they're safe and effective, we can distribute millions of doses around the country. And I truly do believe it's a testament to our incredible healthcare companies. It's one of the reasons why I called out Kamala Harris in that debate last week over the fact that she said that she wouldn't trust Donald Trump, a vaccine developed under Donald Trump's administration. That's outrageous. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris got to stop playing politics with people's lives. I mean, we're going to have a safe and effective vaccine, and when we do, it's going to be a tribute to our incredible healthcare research community. It's going to be a tribute to the leadership of President Trump.
Okay, Mr. Vice President, I have to ask you, because you're a dad, and I want to know what your kids said to you when you finished that debate and they told you about the fly that had landed on your head.
Well, they're the ones that told me.
I bet they did.
I didn't know he was there. No, my kid, you know what? I love my kids. I got a law school grad who's going to get married next year. I got a Navy wife who's a published author and an incredible gal. My daughter's actually helped me with debate prep, and my Marine Corps son and his wife were there as well. And they all told me, Dad, you did okay, but they did tell me about the fly. It was a good laugh for all of us.
I know. I mean, honestly, for every family dinner from here on out, it could be the story of, that just brings down the house. Vice President Pence, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
So we'll have more.
That she was hypocritical is a gross misreading of what she said.
I saw your finger out there. Go ahead now, Franken. Go ahead and respond. Yes.
That's one of the things she said. That's one of the things she said. But she went to great lengths to explain why it was proper to seat Justice Kennedy in '88, but not to take up Merrick Garland. And she went out of her way to say, oh, they're already casting primary votes. That's what she said. They're already doing votes in New Hampshire. She did say that. And why would she say that if it didn't matter? And this is completely hypocritical. Go back and look at that interview. Yes, she did say at the end, with raw power, the Senate can deny this. Yes, that's part of the Constitution. Well, stacking the court, there's nothing against that in the Constitution either. But if the Republicans do this, all it says is, all we care about is raw power. But not one Republican said what Rich said. Lindsey Graham didn't say it. Tom Tillis didn't say it. Ted Cruz didn't say it. John Cornyn didn't say it. Mike Lee didn't say it. None of them said that. They are all giant hypocrites.
Well, I think as you conceded, she said what I said she said, which is that the president has the power.
Yeah, but why did she say the two previous things? Why did she say, so did she bring up something that was meaningless? No, she went to great lengths to say the difference between Judge Kennedy. Why bring that up? Why bring up something meaningless unless you're not, if you're actually not being genuine?
What she said is when you have someone with similar ideological leaning as the vacancy, it's not going to be as politically contentious. But the president has the power to nominate, and the Senate has the power to act or not. And the president clearly, many cases.
And by the way, is she of the same political leaning as Ginsburg?
Why don't you let me finish my point? So when the president and the Senate majority are of the same party during an election year, these nominees almost always get confirmed. And it's just obvious to me, if the shoe was on a different foot, and you had a Democratic president, a Democratic Senate, of course the Democratic Senate would try to confirm a nominee in these circumstances.
That's pure power. That's pure power.
I will say this. I think the conclusion that my first-rate colleague and I came to today is he or she who has the votes apparently makes the rules, because that apparently is what we've learned from the process here. I got to pause the conversation. You know, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead, Senator. One quick. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, she was pointing out that's how the Constitution works. The president nominates and the Senate disposes. There's nothing in the Constitution about stacking the court, but everyone knows that would be a power play that you shouldn't do. This is a power play that the Republicans should not do, and Rich Lowry knows it.
Well, Joe Biden hasn't yet said a power play that no one should do. You want to answer that question?
Well, I will pause the conversation here because I look forward, I will say this, I look forward to bringing back Frontline. I think we got to bring back, get Lowry v. Franken. It would make William F. Buckley, I think, very happy.
He's a good man, Rich Lowry, except
anyway. Garrett Haig, Shannon Pettypiece, Claire McCaskill, Al Franken, Rich Lowry. I appreciate that we're ending with a laugh and a chuckle that shows you we all can disagree on this channel without being disagreeable. Anyway, thank you all.
That was that funny.
Well, you know, fair enough. I gotta let it go there. Katie Tur.
Miss you, Al.
Katie Tur. We'll continue our coverage after this break. Thanks very much.
Than his own party has been pushing.
I would like to see a bigger stimulus package, frankly, than either the Democrats or the Republicans are offering.
But here's the Republican who he would need to make that happen.
I think that's unlikely in the next 3 weeks.
Now, these Republicans are trying to thread the needle, distance themselves from the president without fully breaking with him. But other GOP senators are all in, like Lindsey Graham, Kelly Loeffler, Joni Ernst, who are tying their success to their support of the president. So why are some Republicans starting to worry that they can't do that? Let's just take a look at this. Democrats are smashing fundraising records in many Senate races. In North Carolina, Cal Cunningham brought in more in the third quarter than the last Democratic incumbent did in her entire campaign. That's ditto for the Democratic challenger in Colorado. In Iowa, not only did the Democratic challenger just raise more than Joni Ernst's 2014 opponent, but Teresa Greenfield has raised more than both Ernst and her 2014 challenger did combined. In South Carolina, Jamie Harrison just raised $57 million in the third quarter. That's a record. Democratic challengers in Texas and Georgia also reported huge hauls. So Republicans are looking at the polls and they're looking at the money and they're hedging their bets. They're still on the SS Donald Trump, but they are inching toward the lifeboats here. And here's the thing, though. They're way out at sea, and they're anxiously wondering if their constituents are going to throw them a line. We are going to know that here in a few weeks. I want to bring in former Republican Congressman Charlie Dent, who has endorsed Joe Biden. And Charlie, Republicans are not totally abandoning the president. That's very clear here, because clearly they still need him. How do you see Trump impacting down ballot races?
Well, Brianna, for those members who are in, swing states or swing districts, this is a really tough time because the numbers of the president keep collapsing, and it's going to be very hard for a lot of these members to distance themselves from the president 3 or 4 weeks out. If you're going to do that, you need to do it over 4 years, not over 3 to 4 weeks. So I think it'll have very little effect. These distancing measures. You want to be seen as a watchdog, not a lapdog. You want to be seen as a check on the president, not a rubber stamp. And I think that's a challenge. And I said this all along, by the way, for members in either party. If you're serving with the party of the president, you better be very careful that you can demonstrate that you have some independence from that executive, even of your own party, even if you support that president on many or most things. You have to be able to demonstrate that to your voters.
Senator Ted Cruz recently warned that Republicans could face what he called a bloodbath of Watergate proportions on Election Day. Do you think that's possible?
Well, I think the worst case scenario is the Democrats run the tables and that they win the presidency, the Senate, and maintain the House. So, the worst case scenario is there could be a very decisive win by Joe Biden. I think it may be probable at this point. The best case for Trump is he pulls another inside straight and wins in a narrow election. But I think that's a fairly remote possibility at this point. But it's more likely you could see a decisive victory by Biden, which could cause enormous down ballot problems for Republicans.
The president is back on the campaign trail today. You know that. We are watching that. And that means, of course, that he's out of COVID isolation 11 days after being diagnosed. He's heading to Florida, North Carolina, Iowa. He's also going to be heading to your state of Pennsylvania this week. What do those stops tell you about where the campaign is this close to Election Day?
Well, I think they're clearly panicked. The fact that they have the president out so quickly after being hospitalized with COVID. You know, hey, Brian, I had COVID back in March. I was never hospitalized. I was never given any drugs. I was all in Gatorade, and I felt miserable. I can't imagine after a diagnosis like that you would be in any mood at all to go out there and visit the public. I mean, I self-isolated for about 3 to 4 weeks as a result, and I had mild symptoms, and I was in a very unpleasant position. I am just stunned that they're allowing the president, his own campaign, to go out and face the public in this way. It's clearly a sign of desperation, and it's also, to me, it seems a bit reckless to go out there and face the public so quickly after this diagnosis.
Yeah, I do think you are right, Congressman. Congressman Charlie Dent, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Brianna. Always great to be with you.
Still ahead, Dr. Anthony Fauci is taking exception to the Trump campaign using his voice in one of their political ads. We'll show you how it was taken out of context and hear his response in an interview with my colleague Jake Tapper.
I'm so grateful that every morning on New Day I get to use my voice and say my piece. Well, on November 3rd, it's your turn to let your voice be heard. Make sure to vote.
State officials in California are investigating after fake ballot drop boxes were found in several locations. Some of them were labeled official when they most definitely were not official. CNN's Kristen Holmes is tracking this for us. Kristen, tell us what you're learning here.
Well, Brianna, according to the Secretary of State in California, this has appeared in at least 3 counties. And I want to pull up a tweet here. This is what we know. This is the regional field director for the California Republican Party. And here he is tweeting, doing my part and voting early. Direct message me for convenient locations to drop your ballot off at. Now you see him there. He's crouched in front of what looks like an official drop box. Says official on it. Here's the problem. It is not actually an official drop box. Lots of questions now what exactly is going on. This also appeared in front of a Baptist church. The church had put out a statement on social media in which they said that this was brought to them by the GOP and it was an approved drop box. Again, not an approved drop box. Now, I did get a statement from the Secretary of State in California where he essentially said that operating an unofficial drop box, especially if you are mislabeling it as an official drop box, is not only misleading to voters, but it is against state law. Now, we did reach out to the California GOP, and this is the statement that's pulled up right now. They have not gotten back to us, but they wrote essentially supporting it, saying if a congregation or business or other group provides the option to its parishioners, associates, or colleagues to drop off their ballot in a safe location with the people they trust rather than hand it over to a stranger who knocks on their door. What's wrong with that? Well, of course, Brianna, we can tell you what's wrong with that. It is a violation of state law, as the Secretary of State said. So still trying to learn more information as to who exactly is behind this and what exactly is happening to those ballots. A lot of unanswered questions.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Kristen, we know you're working on this story. Kristen Holmes, thank you so much. A big hint today on the future of cruise ships in the pandemic, plus an extraordinary split screen. Long lines of early voters in Georgia as the Senate holds the confirmation hearing for the president's Supreme Court nominee.